This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of Stand-Up Comedy, host and MC. And for a long time, I've been trying to nail this guy down. Not only one of my oldest friends in the business, but one of the most successful comic entertainers that we've had a chance to have on the podcast. He has done, produced amazing songs that made the hit parade. He's been in movies. He's got an iconic character. He was even on The Simpsons. I mean, this guy has done it all, but it all goes back to friendship that we built back in 1980. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the best in the business, it's Bruce Baum. Bruce, it took about a year and a half, but I got you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I'm blushing right off the bat. So,
well, it's so true that when I opened my club, Laughs Unlimited, in 1980, you had already been a successful comic for a couple of years, performing around colleges. You were on Make Me Laugh, several things already going on. And what was a real honor for me as a club producer was not only getting to book you, but we became pretty good friends, and you worked for years and years at all of my clubs and special events, my TV show. You were a huge part of my success at Laughs Unlimited, and here in front of everybody, I just want to say thank you, man. You're one of the best.
Well, let me say thank you right back, because you've always been supportive. Aside from the club, you invested in my film, The Adventures of Babyman. So, which is still a classic that's never been seen. So,
well, I was really smart about investments, but we're already going off on the future. Let's go back a little bit. I know that you played football at UCLA, and you ended up transferring up to UC Davis, my neighborhood, and it was at college that you started doing comedy. Is that right?
Yeah, you might say that football got me into comedy. I made it as a walk-on at UCLA as a freshman, and I got to play and everything, but I knew I wasn't going to be a pro. So I decided to transfer to UC Davis to play more. So I transferred up there, and oddly enough, I started doing comedy as soon as I got there. So I never went out for the team. I played intramurals, but I ended up starting doing comedy up there. My first cousin, Ken Eston, also went up there with me, and we kind of formed a comedy team. And what we would do is we would run into the dining commons or the library, and he would strum his banjo, and I would blow a horn or scrape a washboard. Everybody would stop, and we would do about 2 or 3 minutes of comedy and then run away. And
that's a great, I never heard that story. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, there were no clubs. So wherever there was a crowd, we made a lot of noise, did some comedy, and ran away. And then what we would do is we would write a letter to the school paper the next day saying, there's a couple of guys that are bothering us while we're trying to study for midterms. They're coming in doing comedy and running away.
Doing your own marketing. That's awesome.
And then the next day we would write a letter from the student health center saying, we've got a rash of students coming in with broken cheeks, and the only common denominator is that they were all laughing in the library yesterday.
That's a great story. What a great way to start. I did not know that your beginnings included a comedy team. You have always been such a strong solo performer, but if you're going to break into comedy, and like you said, there was no clubs very few clubs and none in Northern California in the late 70s. So to kind of create your own environment to entertain in is genius.
And then we started playing in small bars in that area for like $20 a night. I don't know how we did 4 45-minute sets, but we started doing that, and then we'd make like $20 a night. which was big money back then. It meant you could go on a date that week. We did that the first year in Davis. We would run around and wherever there was a captive audience, we would perform. Then between our first and second years up there, our junior and senior years, we went to crowded medical buildings in the San Fernando Valley during the summer, and we tried to talk doctors into hiring us to entertain crowded waiting rooms.
Well, you got a captive audience, and they certainly needed some humor.
Right. Well, one doctor came out and said, it was a psychiatrist actually, said, "You guys are crazy. You're going to be spreading disease from office to office. You're going to be in one office with communicable diseases, and then you're going to go to an office where people are in there for like orthopedics." So, but he ended up hiring us to play his daughter and his wife's big birthday party. It was at a big country club. And
so one of your first paid gigs.
Exactly. It was $20. And he said, "Can you guys play this? It's my wife's favorite song. She'll cry when you play it. It's called Scarlet Ribbons." And as Ken was saying, "No, we don't know it," I was saying, "It's in our set."
Always the showman, Bruce. And I'm sure you didn't know the song from hell, but you were going to learn it.
Right. We went straight to the music store and got the record and the sheet music. And when we did it, indeed, she did cry, but it wasn't because it was sentimental.
It was the poor performance.
It was, yes. It was. But, you know, as a team, we did like the Merv Griffin show. We did American Bandstand.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
So you were doing that as a comedy team. See, I knew you did some early TV, but I always thought it was just as Bruce Baum, the soloist. I didn't know that your comedy team was. How long were you guys together?
We were together about 2 or 3 years. Well, 2 years in college, and then we moved down here because this is where we lived when we were done with college. And our first real gig, we worked out at a little club in Northridge called Pinocchio's, and they had like singers. We were the only comics. And then we went and auditioned at the Ice House. Before it was a comedy club, they would have like singers and a comic might open the show. So we were opening for Scatman Crothers.
No.
And for those of you who don't know Scatman Crothers, he was the black janitor in The Shining, but in the 40s and 50s, he was a major lead singer with swing bands and scat bands.
Oh, he was amazing, and what a great start. And you mentioned briefly you even performed at Busch Gardens as a team.
Yeah, we got auditioned there, and they said, "You're hired, but we want a trio," which was odd. It was just two of us. So I called one of my buddies from high school and said, "Can you just stand here? We'll make you a tub bass, and then you just sit here and hit the strings and play the tub bass. That's all you got to do." And then our show got so rowdy that
did you get kicked out of Busch Gardens?
Well, Augie Bush Jr. said, "You know, you're getting the crowds too rowdy," because back then they would give them beer to drink too, and we would have people dancing and doing stuff like on the rails that, you know, on the other side of the rails was like water. It was like a little, you know, boat area. So as he's telling us to bring it down a tad, the guy who's just getting paid to do a tub bass goes, "You can't tell us what to do. This is a free country." And we're
so he didn't really understand the concept of you're a paid employee at that point, or at least
right.
Contract labor.
Right. Hey, we're in show business. So anyway, we didn't last much longer there, but it was a fun run.
No, that's cool.
And then we started playing clubs around L.A. And then George Miller saw us when we opened up for Scatman Crothers and said, "Why don't you guys play in the Comedy Store?" And he set up an audition with Mitzi Shore like the following week. And we were regulars right off the bat. So it was, and then we were together for about 2 years at the Comedy Store.
Now, this had to be the late 70s, because when I met you, you were already an established solo act.
Right. We were a team from 76 to 78 at the store, 75 actually, from the middle of 75 to the middle of 78. But we had been doing it in college and in little clubs and Busch Gardens, before then. But in 78, we broke up. He became a writer. He ended up winning an Emmy. He wrote on Cheers and Taxi. And we're first cousins. We still see each other. He didn't enjoy performing as much as I did. So he went into writing, and I went solo and got seen by Make Me Laugh right away, and ended up doing that. Ended up doing, again, Merv Griffin on my own and American Bandstand on my own. And then Make Me Laugh is... I'm sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, this was right around 1980 when I met you. You were doing Make Me Laugh and the Merv Griffin Show. But we want to explain to the audience, if you have not seen Bruce Baum, you got to Google his name. You'll probably recognize him. As I said, he's been on dozens of shows, a couple movies, The Simpsons. But what I was going to interrupt and say is that I am not surprised that you went off solo and ended up having such a successful career, because you has always been one of the nicest, high-energy guys. I mean, you gave it your all, it seemed like, every show. And from a producer's point of view, it was a gift, because there was always so much kinetic energy. It was just always fun when Bruce was in the house.
Oh, gosh, I'm blushing again.
Well, I'm just saying it's true. Now, when you went solo... do you remember any of your first jokes or bits? Was there something that you could share with the audience that, you probably wouldn't say today, but was a big deal 40 years ago?
Wow. It's hard for me because I took just a little bit from our act. And I'm trying to think what my first jokes were, because there was a time when I probably had more props than I had
material. Well, I didn't explain that to the audience. For those that didn't know, Bruce Baum was not only a terrific stand-up comic, but he was one of the first really popular prop comics. And this was before Gallagher and a few other people that used props. But Bruce, you really made an art out of prop comedy early on.
If I had to say what, it wasn't long after the team broke up that I came up with Babyman and did that at the Westwood Comedy Store the first night. And it was incredibly successful the first night. So I ended up having to, the very first time I did it, Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie were in the crowd. I think it was right after Carrie came out. Yeah, it was just, that's probably the first major bit that I wrote after we broke up. Was Babyman.
See, I was saving that to later in the interview, because I always thought, when I mentioned earlier on in your intro, an iconic character, Bruce Babyman Baum, when you would come out, and for the audience, there's some videos on my video site you can see, but he would go into a large orange bag, kind of looked like a giant stand-up carrot, and rustle around, and he's doing a little bit of material. But when the bag dropped, here's a almost naked Bruce Baum. And we're not talking, you didn't have like a model type body. You're like at a normal, late 20s kind of body, and a little on the hairy side, and nothing but a diaper. And the crowds would go nuts.
I still had my shoes on.
Yeah. Well, the shoes made it. But I got to tell you, Babyman, I thought came along later. What I remember as the prop comedy is you could take very simple things and turn them into very funny things. There's the Rubber album, and you would talk, of course, nobody knows what an album is anymore, but you'd hold it up and say it's a bitch when you leave your record in the car on a hot day, or when you would hold a fly over the globe of the world and go, I'm too high. I mean, these are things that, people that saw you would never forget.
Well, and I run into people. I was in Yuma, Arizona last week, I ran into some people that saw me 41 years ago at the Universal Amphitheater with Kenny Loggins. I saw some people from the 80s that said they saw me in Vegas in the 80s. I've run into people that said they saw me in Sacramento. So it is amazing how long, I guess, that lasts in people's memories.
Well, not only is it the terrific comedy, but again, the reason Babyman is iconic is it's an image, and it was so funny that it was used on The Simpsons. I mean, it is something that is a terrific triumph and verification of your creative talents, Bruce. It really was an amazing bit. I did not know it was that old, but it carried through your much of your career. In fact, I think you did a comic book about it, right?
Yes, The Adventures of Babyman, Born to be Raised.
Well, we've gotten off track a little bit. So you were doing some college stuff. You got to do Busch Gardens. You started to hit some TV shows as a solo act. I know it was in 1980 when I had just opened my club that you came to work for me. You were already an established headliner. We became fast friends, and you ended up being one of the big-time regulars. I mean, I think you worked one of my clubs every 3 or 4 months for years. And like you said, alluded to, we got to do some side projects together. We did a one-man show once. We worked on Marty Feldman Eyes together. Why don't you tell the audience about Marty Feldman Eyes? That was a huge success.
Yeah, that was, again, I wrote that, and then Kim Carnes ripped me off with that song, Betty Davis Eyes.
Exactly. That's how it went.
It was a novelty song before, I think Weird Al had just come out with another one, Rides the Bus. And it was the days when the people who wrote the hits would not let you make fun of their stuff. Kim Carnes hated my song, Marty Feldman Eyes. So they wouldn't give us the rights to use it. So we changed the tune a little bit enough. Later on, she said, I believe in People Magazine and Rolling Stone, she called Marty Feldman Eyes subpar trash.
Well, that's great press.
Well, they called me and said, what do you respond to that? I said, her standards are a lot higher than mine. I just consider it regular trash. So,
well, Marty Feldman's Eyes was a video that I had hooked you up with a production crew here in Sacramento. You brought in some talented people, and I was always behind the scenes, but I got a chance to be there as the music video was produced. And it was just, in fact, I just watched it the other day. It's always been part of my history. And everybody, if you get a chance, Google Marty Feldman Eyes by Bruce Baum. The video is still out there. And it is so funny. You'll see exactly how creative and talented Bruce is. Now, at that point, you're already starting to work for me at Laughs Unlimited. Do you have any early memories or good stories about working at Laughs?
Well, there's one thing I remember, and then there's one story that the best practical joke that's ever been played on me was played there. But one thing I do remember, there was a bar around the corner from you guys in Old Sac that had 2 floors. And between the first and second floor, they had one of the very first Pac-Man machines. I remember seeing that because this was like the next step up from Pong. I remember seeing that and going, wow, this is going to be huge. And sure enough, Pac-Man became like a phenomenon. Of course, now you look back at that, in 10 years, we're going to be able to strap realities onto our head at birth.
Yeah, but at the time, and that's about 1981, 82, Pac-Man was considered a huge jump from Pong. And this was long before first player shooters or any sort of integral gaming. But yeah, Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man were very popular at the time.
I remember that because it was the first time I'd ever seen it. Now, as far as a story, my favorite story, for people that don't know the layout, the comedy club, Laughs Unlimited, was on the bottom floor. And for a while, you had a magic club / store above it on the second floor. And that's where the bathrooms were. So after the show, we would go hang out up in the Magic Club. And so one night I'm hanging out there, and unbeknownst to me, James Wesley Jackson, who's another comedian known as the Environmedian, he's in town, unbeknownst to me, someplace else. I walk out of the comedy club, out of the Magic Club, and start walking to the bathroom, and I hear footsteps behind me. I don't turn around and look who it is, but I go into the bathroom, and I hear whatever footsteps those were follow me into the bathroom. And I still don't turn around. I open up the door to the stall and walk inside, and whoever's behind me, I still don't turn around. Whoever's behind me walks into the stall with me and shuts the door and locks. At that point, I figure someone's either trying to rob me or rape me. So either way, I'm about ready to fight. So I look down and I see two hands behind me. And after I say what I said, and I'll tell you that in a minute, neither one of us could stop laughing for about 10 minutes. You know, like when you laugh and then you stop and then you start laughing again? Okay, so I'm in the stall with somebody behind me. I have no idea who it is. And without turning around, I say, you know what? You can use it first.
That's a great line.
And then I turn around and see it's James, and we both could not stop laughing. And then we both worried that somebody might walk in and hear two guys laughing in the stall. So
yeah, that would have been a pretty picture.
There was somebody in the stall with me, and I didn't know who it was or why. You know, I've never had anybody walk in the stall and lock it. So
I would have been scared.
Yeah,
that's funny.
I'm just trying to think, what can I say to get me out of this? So, you know, you can use the toilet first.
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah, it was. And then for like the next couple hours, every time we looked at each other, we laughed as we came back into the magic room. But yeah, that was the best practical joke that's ever been played on me.
Oh, that's funny. Thanks for sharing that. I hadn't heard that. One of the other stories, Bruce Baum, famous road stories that was not involving laughs, but still one of the hallmark road stories that I ever heard, where you and two other comics were on a road trip to a show to work together, and it gotten late at night. And
oh, yeah.
Do you want to tell the story? It's hilarious.
Well, it was Gary Shandling, and Jeff DeHart.
Two very funny guys.
Right. And so we were playing in San Diego at the Comedy Store. And this was like really back in the early days. I don't even know if there was a road then. When we got done with the show, Jeff went on first, then Gary, and then myself. We're looking all over for Jeff because we're going to drive home. We couldn't find Jeff. We decided to go back to the car and drive around looking for him. We get to the car, and Jeff's asleep in the driver's seat. So as he's sleeping in the driver's seat, Gary Shandling gets into the passenger seat, and as I throw myself onto the hood, Gary hits Jeff real hard, pointing to the front of the hood and goes, "Look out!" And Jeff takes the wheel and just starts spinning it all over the place, and then stops and goes, "You fucking asshole."
It had to scare the crap out of him.
Yeah, we couldn't stop laughing. So
you had told that story a couple times in after show sit downs and little drinking events, and that always remembered that story because I thought you guys were actually out on the road, but that's still so funny. And Jeff DeHart, who was a great comic, Gary Shandling, of course, rest his soul, was an amazing comic, and to have that experience and that story to share so many years later and Jeff just must have crapped his pants. I mean, that's hilarious.
Yeah. And by the way, when I tell it in my act, I leave their names out, and it is, I basically say we're driving late at night. We get kind of tired. We pull over. We decide to take a break, and as soon as we pull over, the driver like that. So yeah, I don't say their names because then it sounds like a name dropping bit. I don't want to.
Well, it's a great story. Thanks for retelling it. I was going to tell it, and I wouldn't have done as good a job. Hey, so you're working at Laughs. You're a regular headliner. You continue to do television. You had a hit with Marty Feldman Eyes, worked on a couple movies, and you were just a very successful headliner. At what point did things you were doing, for some reason, you did a lot of game shows. You were on Match Game, Password, Hollywood Squares. Was that because of your unique look? We should tell everybody he looks like Dave Crosby, but he's got his own distinct look. What led you to all this TV?
Well, they just, I was doing a lot of TV at the time. I was doing Make Me Laugh. I got a regular part on the Stockard Channing show. And the producers of those shows liked me enough. As a matter of fact, at one time, they did a pilot for a show called Yahtzee, based on the Yahtzee board game. And on the pilot, I was the middle square. So if that show had got picked up, I would have been like their Paul Lynde guy.
Oh,
but I'll
man.
tell you, I'm a huge fan of Steve Allen. So it just seems like he's always been the first Merv Griffin I did. He was on. This is a funny story with Hollywood Squares. I walked in one day and I looked at the lineup because we shoot, I think we shoot all 5 in one day or over 2 days. And I look at the lineup and I go, wow, I'm the middle square 4 out of 5 days. So I go back to my dressing room and my door's slightly open. I can see Steve Allen walk by and he looks at the lineup and knocks on the producer's door, walks in, walks out. 5 minutes later, there's a new schedule. I'm the middle square 1 day, and he's the middle square 4 days.
So he made sure he made his mark.
But I have no qualms with that. I mean, the fact that I was even at 1 day when he was on the show was enough for me.
No, to be able to interact with a creative talent like that, and you've had many opportunities. I mean, George Carlin, a number of people that you got a chance to work with. You were opening for rock concerts, so you met a lot of band members, and you really have had and still have an exciting career in life that comedy led you to. And one of the reasons I enjoy doing this podcast, Bruce, is that comedy was a big part of my life, and I'm having trouble letting it go. And so I'm doing this podcast. But it's so great to hear how comedy took somebody's life and where you were not only able to have a successful career and make plenty of money, but you had all these amazing experiences because you had the balls to get up on stage. I mean, it really, I don't know if you've ever looked at it in that kind of capsulated form, but stand-up comedy took you down a terrific road.
It did. And, the very first time I went on and did stand-up, I was at the Comedy Store on a double date. And it might have been with Ken Espen. And back then, that was a big thing to take a date to was the Comedy Store. And the big honcho back then was Gabe Kaplan. And this was before Mitzi had it. It was when Sammy Shore ran the club. And I just asked on a night when everybody seemed to be bombing, do you mind if I go on? And they let me go on. And I killed. And they said, gee, where are you from? Where'd you move from? And I said, that was the first time I've ever been on stage. So they invited me back the next night, and I called and I invited all my buddies from high school. I said, you're not going to believe this. I went on at the Comedy Store last night. No, you didn't. Yeah, I did. And they're letting me go back on tonight. So like 7 or 8 of my buddies from high school came. I bombed so bad. You can hear cars going by.
That's exactly how it goes.
Oh, you can hear people, taking their straws around their drinks. It was stirring it. It was terrible. And I didn't go on stage again for a couple of years. It was when I was in college and we started running in and then running out and doing comedy that I did it again because it was such a,
it's a great story because it shows in a very short story how comedy can be the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And like a lot of things that people do in their lives, whether it's a sport, a career, a relationship, you have to experience the lows to really appreciate the highs. And that first time on stage, when you got all that accolades and applause from the audience, that's when I think the comedy hook got in you. And the next night, reality set in, and it took you a couple years to get over that. But you have been for decades now a terrific high energy act when it comes to comedy. And I think that your personality and your energy, and, you know, we got to face it, you're damn funny, is what led you to all those game shows and appearances. I mean, you were a character on Simpsons. Explain that.
Well, they did a comedy festival in Springfield, and my agent called and said, you know, they're doing a comedy. It's Jay Leno and Stephen Wright, Janine Garofalo and Bobcat, and they want to know if you'll be on the show. And I said, well, where do I go to audition? And they said, it's not an audition, it's an offer. I said, well, fucking A, you know what?
you made it when the Simpsons are looking for you.
Yeah, I said, well, don't blow it. Don't negotiate price if it's going to put me out. Just get me the gig. And it's, you know, I still get residuals, but more importantly than that, you know, there's people that are Simpsons fans that know every episode. So, yeah, and it validated me with my kids. You know, the game shows didn't mean much, and so it was the fact that I was on The Simpsons as myself.
Yeah, isn't it funny how our kids don't really appreciate what we've accomplished? I mean, I produced 2 TV series and hosted a 1-hour special and had all those concerts, and my kids could like give a crap. I'm still just their dad who thinks he's funny, right? And
right.
So doing something as major as being a character featured on The Simpsons, that would have to mean something to the kids. Now, in 1991, though, you also were in the movie Shakes the Clown, and there were some pretty big stars in that. I know the movie wasn't a huge financial success, but it's out there. I mean, and did you produce that as well?
Oh, no. That was Bobcat Goldthwait. That was his film.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, it was, you know, Adam Sandler's first film, really. He was in it. We were all clowns. But, yeah, it was, it was Goldthwait and Tom Kinney, who is the voice of SpongeBob, and Blake Clark, and Robin Williams was in it. And, yeah, it was... like I said, Adam Sandler. So it was a blast shooting it. And it's funny, I'll have people come up to me and they'll go, you know, you're in one of my favorite movies. And I can tell by the way they say it, it Shakes the Clown, because it's either everybody's favorite or they don't like it.
Well, it was one of those movies that got a cult following. And in the comedy world, there's only so many films that get a cult following, and Shakes the Clown was one of them. And the fact that all those now celebrities that weren't quite as famous, I mean, Robin always was, but I mean, that, you know, getting those together and having that much fun and shooting that, what a great experience.
You know, when that movie came out, I was playing in Las Vegas at the Riviera, and I wanted to use it as a credit because the movie was out. And there was a clown convention at the Riviera.
Really?
Swear to God. And the clowns had been on television, both nationally and locally, ripping Shakes the Clown because they said, you know, clowns don't use that kind of language. You know, we don't do drugs. We don't use that dirty language. So I didn't really want to use it. I didn't know who was a clown in the audience. But I
well,
but so later in the week, and it must have been right about the time that their booze and their booths closed down, and they were done, and they were undressing. But I was up in my room, and an earthquake hit, and the buildings kind of swayed. I opened up my door because I've been in enough earthquakes living in Southern Cal to decide, am I going to go down the stairs or hang on here? As I opened the door, all these clowns that were complaining about the language in the movie are running around the hallway with clown shoes, but their shirts off, yelling, "Fuck, shit, what do we do? Holy fuck!" And
that paints such a great image.
Big floppy shoes and their red noses on and half their makeup off, and they're running up and down the hall. And there was no cell phones back then, or else I would have recorded it. It was extremely. I just stood there watching for a couple minutes.
That's hilarious. That paints such a great picture, a great image of these, half-clad clowns running up and down, swearing up a storm. Obviously, they're not Californians.
Right, and when you got big clown shoes on, you can't run regular. You're running with your legs way up in the air, high-stepping. So, yeah, it was a hell of a sight.
Oh, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing, Bruce. Well, you and I were working in comedy up until about 2000, and then I sold the club and went into other endeavors. Why don't you share with the audience quickly what you've been up to the last 20 years?
Well, let's see. Some of the major stuff, if anybody's familiar with the books Letters from a Nut, it was written under the pen name Ted L. Mancy, but it was written by myself and Barry Marder, even though Jerry Seinfeld and Barry Marder are out saying that Barry wrote the book. You can see my video. You can actually go to brucebaum.com and see the video. It's just out and out not true. So I'm the co-writer of the first 3 Letters from a Nut books. I wrote another book on my own under my name called On Hold, which I only wrote when I was on hold on the phone. So I used to get so ticked off being put on hold. I said, I got to turn this into more positive energy. So I wrote short stories. I wrote fairy tales. I wrote tales that have no fairies in them at all. And then I also wrote just whatever came to my mind, like things like I think the Bible says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But what happens if you get beat up by a blind, toothless guy? So, so that book, that's full of that. That's on Amazon. Did that, and I've been working. I shoot videos. I don't wait for a green light. I paint on the canvas I can afford. So I'm doing that, and in about by the time this airs, I'll have a show on YouTube. You can probably go to brucebaum.com. And that'll have the link, but it'll be sketches and talking and guests. It'll be a little 5 to 7 minute facecation, a place you can take your face, and it'll be a show that the whole family can enjoy, depending on how you raised your family.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've gotten 2 great offers there. You can go to Amazon and find Letters from a Nut or the book On Hold, or you can go to YouTube in just a couple. Right now, and Google search Bruce Baum and find his new YouTube show. So, Bruce, as usual, your creative juices are flowing. I'm going to backstep just a little because I think it's funny, and I don't know if you think it's funny, but Letters from the Nut, it's obvious that you're one of the authors because in the beginning of one of the books, in the preface, you actually say you want to thank your children and your bride, Lynn, and you mentioned Dylan and your daughter. And that was the big giveaway, even though it was a huge secret in Hollywood. My wife, Jill, pegged that you were the author right away and said, well, what's the big mystery? It's Bruce. And sadly, and unbeknownst to her, knowing that it was a big secret, I'm sure you remember the story. She was chit-chatting with one of her friends, Miss Diane Nichols, who happens to be, and I don't think this is a secret, one of the biggest gossips in Hollywood. And Jill mentions this to Diane, and literally almost overnight, the word got out about you and Barry being the mystery authors. Jill felt so bad. She just felt horrible because she had no idea. We're in Sacramento. We have no idea what's important in LA and to the quote unquote Hollywood scene. Then it was this big mystery in Southern California, and Jill's just blabbing about it to anybody that would listen.
Well, that's okay because we still denied it. The LA Times called us, and a lot of other, reporters came and asked, and guest on TV. So I didn't know it was going to backfire, and that Jerry was going to go on and tell everybody that Barry wrote the whole thing. But it was a big part of the book was written here at my house in front of, and there were people that saw us write it together. So.
Oh, it's everybody believes you, Bruce, and I think it was just cute that in an innocent way, Jill got the word out kind of ahead of schedule of who Ted L. Nancy was, and through the incredible mouth of Diane Nichols. I just wanted to get that story out because I love talking about my bride, and this was one of the things that was a huge mistake / accident that to this day she feels guilty about.
Well, tell her not to feel guilty, that it never really mattered much then. And now it actually just lends credence to what I'm saying.
Exactly. So, well, and like I said, you mentioned your family right in the cover of the book. So let's get to your latest great success. You have been creating and selling hot sauce.
Yes.
It's called Hot Noggin. Tell me about it.
It's called Noggin Blast.
Noggin Blast.
Noggin, like noggin, and then blast, Blast, and it's at nogginblast.com. And I grow my own ghost peppers, habaneros, serranos, and then I make they're grown organically, and everything else is organically certified. Very few ingredients, no added salt, no sugar. And, I did it originally just as I had cancer in 2012. I had head and neck cancer.
Yeah, we were aware, and you were in our prayers, sir.
Well, I was very fortunate. I had like 7.5 weeks of radiation, and then 1 day a week of very light chemo, and it basically cured me. The doctor said I'm cured, not in remission after 5 years.
Yippee! But, wait, let's get it done right.
Yes. So I bring my own crowd with me wherever I go. I lost my taste for, the doctor said, you're going to lose your taste. And I said, does that mean I'm going to wear stripes and polka dots? But I did lose my taste. They asked me if I wanted a feeding tube. I said, no, if it's painful, I can handle that. But it never was really that painful, but I couldn't taste anything. And when my taste came back, I used to not be able to eat hot foods, but I could eat, spicy foods. And hot peppers are known to have capsaicin in it that help. It's an antioxidant. Some people think it fights cancer. So I started growing my own peppers and making my own sauce. And I would take them to radio shows just in jars. And they would say, my God, why aren't you selling this? You should be making this. So after about 3 or 4 years, I decided, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I didn't do it commercially, but I made some and I gave some to friends. And the response was extremely gratifying. And so last year, I incorporated. I cook in a commercial kitchen, and I started selling. I actually tried to start selling it a year in 2012, March 15th. I had a big restaurant in Yuma was going to carry it. Now it's called the Zydeco Grill, and I had a big launch party. Did a set. People bought, and on the drive home they closed the country, so I couldn't even go to the commercial kitchens. In December, everything kind of opened up. So I started selling in December online, and it pretty much sells out pretty quick. I make a ghost pepper with extra garlic, a ghost pepper with pineapple, habanero mango, a lot of different ones. I usually have 2 or 3 available at a time, and everybody likes it. I'm spending all my time growing and packing and cooking, and it's kind of cool. I'm enjoying it.
That's great, Bruce. I mean, you obviously have already given of yourself some 40 years of comedy creativity, and to successfully fight cancer and come out of it with something new and creative, something totally different in a culinary nature, and doing a hot sauce. And it gives you this kind of joy, both the growing and the creating of the product. And I've seen the label, Noggin Blast. It's hilarious. It's your face. Everybody should go out and Google Noggin Blast. And if you like hot sauces, check out Bruce's. But that's a great story, Bruce. And thanks so much for sharing it. You know, we've had a chance to know each other for over 40 years. We've got a chance to work together on several projects. You allowed me behind the scenes in a few projects, and it's just always been an honor to call you friend. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. We're all going to keep looking forward for your YouTube show, and everyone's going to go out and check out your book On Hold and buy some Noggin Blast. But for me, the tip of the iceberg is getting an opportunity to chat on this podcast. So thank you.
Well, first of all, let me say the same thing back. I've always considered us good friends. There's very few club owners I can say that about. But you've always
yeah, we're a certain type.
But well, no, it's you were always very hands-on. You were always concerned about your audience, and it was always a pleasure to not only play your clubs but hang with you. And you were always supportive in the projects I had, whether it was lending a hand or investing. So I want to say back and let everybody know how grateful I am for our friendship. And that's, you know, that's one thing different about the early days than now. You know, back in the 80s when the road was starting, you could do a week with somebody and even today you're friends with them, because back then you would hang for a week. You do a lot of stuff together. You got to know each other. Nowadays, it's not so much. You're at a club, you see each other at the show when you're on the road. But there was a whole different kind of camaraderie that melded everybody together back then. Those were wonderful days. I don't think they'll ever be recreated because it was fresh and new. The 80s, comedy was like rock and roll. The crowds were phenomenal. The comics were friendly. Lots of stories. I'm sure you've heard from all the comics. There's a couple that aren't with us anymore that even have more outrageous stories. Guys like John Fox. And
oh, yeah, he was a character.
I just want to say, you know, I've always been appreciative of the relationship we had and your niche in the comedy movement that basically blossomed in the early 80s.
Yeah, I think, and I've mentioned it several times, I was so blessed to catch that comedy wave as it was just starting, and I followed the guidelines. My mentors were other comics like you and Bob Saget and Dave Coulier, Gary Shandling, I can go on, that I would go to and say, hey, what do I need to do to make this club successful and comfortable for the comics? And that's what created such a comfortable, creative atmosphere so that we could all go on and succeed in this unique art form. But one of the hallmarks of the history of Laughs Unlimited and my time on the fringe of show business is my relationship with Bruce Babyman Baum. So Bruce, again, thanks for doing the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, get his hot sauce, Noggin Blast, check out his books, and keep an eye out. Go to YouTube right now and Google Bruce Baum. You'll see his new show. Bruce, continued success. I know you always have your creative fingers in some pies, which I won't be eating, and we know that there's great things coming. Thanks again, sir.
Thank you, Scott, and best to you and Jill and Bobby and everybody.
All right. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another great show. Bruce, Babyman Baum, thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.